Hi everybody, I made a little God of War copy where I try to recreate some of the nice mechanics of God of War, especially the axe mechanic. So here is my game. Let me show you a little demo real quick. So we can move Kratos like this. By the way, all assets, so the environment, Kratos, the axe, and the enemy are all pre-made assets. I didn't make any of them. The axe and Kratos is from Sketchfab. This is actually the Kratos that they use in Fortnite. A mutant and the animations are from Mixamo, and environment is from Unity Asset Store. I'll try to put a link down below for all the assets. So we got movement like this, and we can go near the mutant, deal some damage, or we can stay back and throw our axe. We can recall it, and you know what? Sometimes, especially bad players like me, we miss the axe, and then on the way back, if it hits the enemy, it also deals damage. And this actually happened to be the final blow that killed our enemy. So that's it for the demo. Let's start with movement. So on the right side here we have our player objects that has a player controller script that we wrote. And here movement is here actually this. We calculate the move direction, we calculate speed, and we calculate vertical velocity, which is gravity, and then we call the controller.move function, which comes with the Unity engine character controller class. So how do we calculate the move direction? That's a very good question. I can show you here. We first check if there's input, and then we calculate the move angle, which is the angle that we want Kratos to move in the y-axis. We take input direction plus the camera angle, and then we convert it back to a vector here as such. And then if there is no input, we set the move direction to move direction n seconds ago. In this case, n is 0.3. The reason for that is when you're pressing two keys, so when you're pressing W and D, for example, you need to be moving on an angle, like 45-degree angles, right? But when you press them, when you release them, if we keep the move direction the same, all of a sudden your character starts to move either like forward or sideways, not 45-degree angle. And the reason for that is when you release W and D, you never release them at the exact same time. There's always a very tiny delay between releasing W or releasing D, and then that stays the last move direction. And all of a sudden, because you're decelerating towards the right or the forward, but not the direction that you were going. To prevent this, we just take move direction 0.3 seconds ago. Let's talk about rotation too. We only rotate the player if the player is attacking or there is movement input. Otherwise, we don't. And the way this works is that if we move the camera, we can see this nice face of Kratos. But once there's movement input, Kratos rotates, so turns, and then moves in that direction. Or like it turns and moves the direction of the input. But whenever moving, we want to see the back of Kratos. That's movement. Let's talk about damage. If you look at the axe, let me type axe because it's attached to the hand, the weapon socket. So we have a box collider here, and we have an axe controller script. Let's open that script. So on trigger, enter. So whenever this box collider collides with something, we enter here. And then we check if the thing that we're colliding with has a health component. If so, if the cooldown is 0, and either one of these two conditions is matched, is true, we apply damage and we start the cooldown. So if it's detached or if the player is attacking. If it's detached because we want to deal damage when the axe is flying, but the player may not be necessarily attacking, or the player may be recalling the axe, and the other time is when the player is attacking. When we're just walking with the axe and there's a collision event, we don't want to deal damage. And then if it's detached and there's a collision event, we want to stick to whatever we're colliding with. Okay, and we have a health script here. Basically, we have a function called apply damage, which we have a variable called health, and apply damage basically decreases the health. So we call that from the axe controller here. So that's how health and damage works. Let's get to the nicest part, the axe throw and axe recall. So the axe throw is actually called from the player because it's player throwing the axe. The axe is not throwing itself. So let's go to the player script, player controller script, and we have a function called throw axe. And this is called from an animation event. So when we press the right mouse button, instead of it calling the throw axe function, it calls an animation. It's the throw axe animation. And the animation is like this, and right at this point, throw axe function is called. And what it does is it sets a direction, and if axe is attached to the player, because we cannot throw it if it's not attached, if axe is attached to the player, we launch the axe. We get the axe controller component, and we call the launch axe function with the axe throw direction that we've already set here in this function, with the speed, the axe throw speed, which is a variable that we set in the editor. Here if we go to player, we can set it in axe throw speed here, and the spin rate, so how fast we want our axe to spin, which can also be set from the editor. So now let's go back to axe controller. We call the launch axe function, which is here. What it does is it transforms, so it detaches the axe from the parent. It adds force and torque. That's all it does. And now, returning the axe. So we return the axe with shift. And this also happens from the player controller. Let's go back. Okay. So fire 3, which is shift. If it's pressed, we recall the axe. So recall axe function is called, and recall axe function is here. It basically gets the axe controller component of the axe and calls a return to player function. The reason I put this in player controller is also because I think it's the player that's recalling the axe. Axe doesn't decide to go to player by itself. So I think it made more sense to have that in the player. Anyways, so it calls the return to player function of the axe. And first of all, this function, it stops the movement of the axe, because we're going to add new movement to it, but if it's moving in a certain direction, for example, we just want it to stop. And then we start a coroutine called return movement with curve point and duration. Okay, so the thing with returning the axe is instead of returning like in a straight line, we return it in a curve. A quadratic Bezier curve, to be exact. And we calculate it here. And we calculate the transform to the transform of the hand, basically the socket. I created a game object called weapon socket here, and that is attached to the hand, and the rotation slowly becomes that rotation when it's like coming back, when the axe is coming back. And that's the axe return movement. Okay, I think those were the most important aspects of the game. I hope you enjoyed it. That's all. Thanks for watching.